Good morning, YouTube. Today I'm going to try and tackle a couple of these Sega Saturns. So I picked up a box of 4 of these. They were about $40 and they were listed as not working. On testing them, one of them worked. It just had a bad disc open button, so the spring's shot on this one. That's probably why they deemed that broken. Otherwise, physically, the condition of it's okay. It's just kind of scratched up. This guy here, I wasn't able to get much action on, but the case is in a better condition. So what I'm going to actually do here in this video is open them up. I'm going to clean out the casing on this and put it on this system so that I have a good physical condition working Sega Saturn. So yeah, I guess what I'll start with is simply opening these up. To open them, now I've never actually opened a Sega Saturn before. So this will be an experience for both of us, but I believe it simply just uses Phillips screws, and they go, yep, right there. So the crosshead screwdriver is all you need here. There's 1, 2, 3, and is that it? Oh, 4, 5. So 5 screws. I'm going to get those out and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I have all 5 screws out. Once again, as I've mentioned in a couple other videos, I like to keep my screws in one of these magnetic dishes. Helps make sure that nothing goes missing, screws aren't bouncing along the floor or table, and they can all be kept in one easy to find location here. So I just set that off to the side. Let's flip this over and open up the casing. So that's the top cover. So as you remember, this particular device, I think this is the one that had the bad cover. So when I push the button, nothing happens. Flipping it over, so there's a little spring mechanism here, and when I do that, it seems to work, but it falls right out. So clearly there's a part missing, and we'll simply harvest that from the good condition one and fix that issue. So I'm just going to set this aside right now. I don't really need to play too much with it. Yep. And now this is the internals of a Sega Saturn. So with all electronics, especially one where there's a power supply built in, it's important to discharge any remaining built-up current. So to do that, you simply turn the system on and let it stay on for a while. Usually it takes only a couple minutes, but these capacitors here, they can maintain a charge for upwards of a couple minutes. So even if the system's turned off, you could wind up shocking yourself or transferring current to another part of the board, frying that board. Since this is a working condition model, I really don't want to do that. But moving on, the next step we're going to do here is to remove the power supply board. So first step is on the back, there are 2 screws right here, and these hold the power jack to the actual casing. So those get removed, and I think they're actually the same size screws as the case screws. And no, they're not. So they're a little bit smaller, and I'm going to show you here. So this larger one is one of the case screws that came out, and the smaller one is one of those ones that held the power supply together. So important to make a mental note of that. Keep those screws separated as they are the same color. There's not a lot of black screws in this system. Once you get in here, they appear to be brass screws. So make note that those small ones go here. And as we discover different screws, we will start setting them aside differently. So let's get this undone. Next step will be disconnecting the power supply. So this cable right here connects the power supply to the power button. So we're going to disconnect that, and I have one more screw we need to take out, and that's right here. And again, that's a brass screw. We can set that aside. And this should just simply lift right out. Oh, there's a clip right on the side here. So you have to pull that aside, and then it just lifts right off. Or it should. something is holding it in place. Oh, so this little part here is a connector at the bottom, so there are holes there, and there's pins poking out of the board right here. So that just holds it in place and transfers the power onto the main board. So the power supply board looks pretty good. We're just going to put that aside and move on to the rest of it. So the next step will be to remove this laser assembly. And that's pretty easy to do. There's actually no screws holding it into place. Oh, there's one right here. But, so there's the connector, and we have to disconnect this. So you simply pull up to disconnect that. Be careful not to really pull at those wires too much unevenly, but tuck that off to the side. And then we have a ribbon connector on the side right here. And this, again, it just goes straight up, and you can lay that off to the side. This part should lift right out. And then there is this strap here. So this can be just unscrewed and set aside. So I'm not exactly positive what the purpose of this strap is. Maybe it grounds it. I don't know. No, it's covered in plastic, so like it has a little plastic sheathing over it. I don't know what the purpose of this is, but it's there for a reason, so we're gonna leave it, but we're gonna set that aside and go deeper. So now we've got, there's a little plastic shielding here that goes underneath where that power supply is. So again, make note of the orientation of it, set that aside. And now we have some more screws to take out. So we have the power switch, one screw there, one screw there, screw, 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 there, 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 and there. So I'm going to take these all out. I'm not going to record this whole thing as it should be pretty straightforward, and I'll be back. Now there is a couple things I want to note. I just disconnected the power switch here, and again that whole assembly can be put aside. But the two screws that came out of that, they're brass screws, they're right here. Now the screws that held the that ribbon connector in place and the screw that held the power supply board in place are also right here. So the power supply screw is the same size as the power switch. The ribbon connector screw actually has more of a domed top on it, so it's tough to pick up on camera, but if you have them in person you can see they're slightly different, and those are short. So make sure to keep those separated. These longer screws are what holds together this excuse me, what holds together this shielding. So just something to keep a mental note of so that you're not mixing them up when you go to reassemble. Now I've also discovered one additional size screw. So you see here, these are the 4 different type of brass screws I've pulled out. From the furthest to the left, this is the one that held that little tether that kept the disc assembly in place. The second on the left is one of the ones that held either the power switch or the power supply board. The second from the right is the one that held this metal shielding, all this onto the board, and then the last one is the longest one. And these are actually what goes through this cartridge slot. So again, make a note of that, make sure that those screws go back in the proper place. Okay, so I think I've got all the screws out. I found 2 more long screws. And the long screws in this case are the ones that go right beside the controller ports. So just to summarize, long screws go in the controller ports, in the cartridge slot. The medium-sized screws go all the other shielding holes like there. The shorter screws hold the power switch into place and the power supply board into place. There's only a couple of those, I think 3. And then the kind of domed top screw here, that's the one that goes right in the middle, which holds that tether to the laser assembly in place. So with all these screws removed, I'm just going to lift this board up now. You have to be careful that you're not going to grab onto any of these connectors, bend anything, break anything off the board, because we remember this was the functional board, so it needs to stay functional. Okay, so that's up, and this is what the Sega Saturn board looks like. So I don't actually know which what these chips do. So I'm not going to tell you, what the CPU or PPU or anything is, because to be honest, I'm not sure at this point. So this is the 7th revision. So it's not a super old version. Does it have a date? 1996. So I think this system was made in 95 or 94, so this is a couple years into its life. I think 95 it was North America, so this is probably one of the later revisions. But otherwise, I mean, the board looks to be in very good shape. We know that it works. It's clean, there's no liquid or anything on it. The only thing is going to be this battery here. So I'm actually going to pop the battery out right now, set it aside, and I'm just going to buy a new battery. These batteries it's the CR2032, so I'm just going to buy another one of those. I mean, I doubt it's ever been replaced. This thing's been around for 23 years, or 21 years, so I think it's about time for a new battery. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other system, and basically what we're going to do is clean up the casing and then swap the boards. It is very important that you keep the parts from the known working system separate from the defective system. You don't want to start mixing them up and then wind up with 2 defective systems. So I'm going to open up the other console and I'll be back once they're ready to go. Okay, so I've opened up the second system, and as you can see, they are quite different. I'm going to put the shielding back on the first one just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. But, so that's basically what I was greeted with when I opened the first system. And this is the second one, so that shielding is noticeably smaller. There's actually a separate board for the controllers. The power supply board is larger. So this is the board from the other console, the working one, and this is the one that wasn't working. So they are different revisions overall. The trouble that I'm going to run into is I don't know if the boards are going to simply swap, because they may have made some changes which affects how they go together. I mean, at first glance they look pretty similar, but I don't really know that I want to go too in depth with this. So what I'm going to do, this was the cover that came off this. I'm just going to simply put it on there. I'm going to clean it first, but we're going to move the cover over and probably just leave it at that. So I'm going to show you quickly how to disassemble the cover and get it cleaned. So this is the underside of the cover. So this is the working one. The spring still works properly. So there are a couple things that we need to do. So all of these screws, there, and there need to come off. We're going to get all the pieces out, and we're simply going to soak this. We're going to get it wet, we're going to wash it, and I may even touch it up with a little bit of a product called Scratch X, which is supposed to remove little minimal scratches like that to really restore the condition of this. So I may need a smaller screwdriver, but we'll give it a try with this. Now these screws here, they are brass screws, but they are much smaller than any other screws in the system. So they should be easy enough to, or are they the same? They are the same size screws as those ones that that were used to, let's see if we can focus here. There we go. Same size as the screws that were used to hold down that ribbon connector that tethered the laser assembly into place. So I can't really get a good focus here, but so they do have a dome top, and I would just keep those separated so that way you know where they go back into place. So I'm going to unscrew all of these. I'm not going to record the whole thing, but you can imagine what it looks like. Okay, so I've gotten this all disassembled here. Oh, I still have the power button, or reset button. There, so everything's disassembled, and we're going to get that washed. Now, it's not necessary to wash all the internal parts like these, and especially because this appears to have some sort of grease on it to help the hinge move properly. Same with this one. I don't want to wash that off and have to re-grease it. This part here is a moving component, and I think the idea on this is to kind of slow down how quickly that lid springs open. So I'm not going to wash that. I don't want water getting in there and ruining how it works. The springs don't need to be washed. There are 3 of them. one of them to hold the main lid, one of them for the cartridge slot on the back, and this one, the small one here, actually this is the cartridge slot on the back. This medium-sized one is which held this white spring mechanism on the eject button in place here. So those aren't going to be washed. The white arm isn't going to be washed. What will be washed is the reset button, the cartridge slot cover, and the door. So I'm going to remove this tape, which I had just used to kind of describe what the issue was, and we're going to get that going. So what I do to wash video game consoles is fill up the sink with hot water and just some dish soap, let it soak for a while, give it a scrub, use a toothbrush to get into any corners and grill marks, and then reassemble it. I'm also going to, I'm going to do the bottom as well. So I'll lift the board out of here, being careful you don't drop it, you don't put it anywhere that you shouldn't, and we're going to soak the bottom of this. As you can see, there's little bits of dust and stuff in there, so we'll give that a clean while we're at it. As well, I'm going to harvest the back cover off one of the other ones, and that simply just snaps into place back here and covers up the battery. So I'm going to wash that at the same time. Alright, so we have the case all cleaned up and it's ready to be reassembled now. So I'm going to walk you through the steps to that. I've already done the actual top half of the case, so just make sure that you're using everything goes back kind of where it came. I'm going to give you a close-up of the springs. So this one did take a little bit of time for me to figure out again, but the hooked end goes over top of this part of the door that opens here, and the long part gets notched under right here. So once you get that in place, that's all good to go. So now we have 5 of the medium length screws which need to go into the board, and they're going to go here, here, there, there, and there in the middle. So I'm going to put those in. I'm not going to record this whole thing, and I'll be back once they're in place. Alright, so these are all in place. Next step is going to be the 4 long screws. So as we remember, these long screws, they're going to go in the cartridge slot and beside the controller ports. So again, those go in place. I'm not going to record it, but I'll be back once they're... Alright, so this is all set now, and we're getting ready to put the laser assembly back in. I'm not doing it to this one, but you see this part here? This is the little connector that detects when the door is closed, the CD door. And if you're doing the, you call it a mod, but if you're doing the mod to hold that shut so that it always thinks the door is closed, now would be the time to do so. So you generally just tape that around here, and it tricks the system into thinking that your door is always closed. I'm not going to do that right now. I might go back and do it later on one of these, but if that's what you're doing as part of your cleaning, take the opportunity to do it right now. And that would be useful for if you're doing the disc swap trick to try and play backup copies that were burnt on a CDR or something like that. So next is going to be the laser assembly. So this assembly, it's going to go in place like this. So it really just sits on top of these posts, and if we remember, underneath, this little tether gets screwed down right there. So take a minute to put that into place, and then you can come back and set this all up. Couple of things. This ribbon connector, now is a good opportunity to kind of clean that up a little bit. Take a Q-tip, scrub these contact tips here. Be careful not to bend them, but this is what connects the laser assembly to the main board. Sometimes they do lose a connection or they get oxidized or something like that. So you could take that as an opportunity to clean it. I've already done that, so what I'm going to do here is just kind of walk through screwing this tether back into place. So you take the final screw in your collection that has that domed tip on it, and that's the one that you're going to use here. So what I do, be careful when you're doing this that you're not actually touching the laser head. Fingerprints, smudges, grease, oils, that type of thing can cause issues when it comes to reading the disc. So I just hold it gently to the side, and let's get that screwed in place. So once again, I'm not actually positive what the purpose of this is. Maybe it just holds it from moving, I don't know. But so laser assembly sits in place here. Again, it's not actually screwed into anything, so it can move up and down. It's got these little spring, well, not springs, but rubber tips, which gives it a little bit of bounce to it. So before you put it together, make sure that you plug it in with this ribbon connector so it just goes straight in. Make sure that it looks flush. If you tilt it sideways, it should be evenly in there. So if it looks crooked, unplug it and put it in again. And this connector here is going to plug right into this spot there. And so if both of those aren't connected, firstly, it's not going to get power. Secondly, it's not going to transfer any of the data to the main board. So that's very important that you do that. Next step is going to be putting the power supply back in place, and that's this one. So as you remember, there was a little plastic bit attached here, and it just goes back into place just like this, I believe. Doesn't really seem right, but yeah, that would be it. So it goes just like that, and then the power supply sits just like so. Again, this connector pin here is going to go into these holes right there. So make sure that that's being lined up. Generally, if you line up the end here with the side of the casing and then just push down, it will go into place. There's a little connector right, or a little plastic tab that snaps into place there just to hold it from moving. So that is good. You have one screw to install there. Actually, before I do that, I had forgotten to put the power switch in, and this goes in underneath. So I'll take this out and we'll put the power switch in place first. So the power switch, the cable runs through this hole here, and it sits in place. There's little screw holes and tabs right there. So we're going to screw that right into place there. Now this uses 2 of the small screws that are remaining. You should have 3 brass screws at this point left in your tray. So 2 of them are going to be used to hold this in together. And if you find that the power button's in your way, you can take it off. It just pops off just like this. I did that to actually clean it. So, and when you're ready to put it back on, it just snaps into place like so. So that's good. We're going to put that plastic bit in place here again, and then the power supply board sits just in place. Push it in so that the connection is made, and then that last brass screw is going to be used right here, and that's going to hold the power supply board into everything. So make sure that this connector gets connected, and that's what sends the power to the board. The last screws in here, not counting the case screws, are going to be right here. So you should have 2 small black screws, not the ones that are used for your for casing. So the 2 of the smaller black screws, they go right in there, and you screw it in. And that's the last part that holds this end of the power supply board into place. One of the systems I got actually was missing a screw, so when I attempted to plug the power cable in, the whole port moved a little bit on me. So these are important to make sure that you get in. That way you're not going to be damaging it or moving the parts or making sure that you have a firm connection. So this should be in there good. This is attached, all the connections are made. So we're going to test this. I'm going to bring it over to my TV and we'll hook it up and make sure that everything works before we close it up. All right, so I've got it hooked up. A couple of things to be very careful about. If you're hooking it up without the cover on, make sure not to touch anything here. There's 2 metal contacts right there, and that feeds directly into your wall. So that's 110 volts of power straight into this machine. If you touch that, you're going to get electrocuted. So make sure that you don't do that. So let's power it on. Oh, there we go. Why am I not getting power? Something wrong with this switch. As soon as I let go... Okay, so I'm going to have to fiddle around with this switch a little bit to see what the issue is. Okay, so what I've done is I just replaced the switch. I grabbed a switch from one of the other systems that I have and put that in place instead. So now we're getting a constant green light. We're getting action on the screen, so I'm going to scroll past this. And since I don't have the disc door in, it probably won't load this game. It's going to hang up at the Sega Saturn screen. So, and it brings us here, drive door open. So what you can do is this piece right here, being very careful not to touch any of the power supply, hold that together and the disc starts spinning. And that's what we want to see. So checking disc format. Still going. All right. And start application. So I'm I'm holding this with one hand, so I gotta use the controller here. So I've chosen start application. Disk is spinning up again. We're getting loading on the screen. And there we go. So we have Virtua Fighter 2. Should load up very shortly here. Or medium shortly. It's kind of the problem with some of these early CD-based consoles is they had very slow load times. Same thing with the Sega CD. Same thing with the Dreamcast. They were loud, they were slow. But it looks like we're in action here. So from there, all we need to do is put the cover on, and there we go. Perfect. So I'm going to let this go. Now it thinks the door is open. Turn that off. So I'm going to put the cover on, and otherwise it's all set to go. I'll come back once it's put together and you can see what it looks like all cleaned up. Alright, so we are back in action here. So what we've done, opened it, cleaned it, replaced the top cover, and put it back together. So this is a pretty good looking Sega Saturn. Physically it's in good shape. There's not a lot of scratches. What I did in a couple of spots was I used this stuff, Plastex, and what it is, it's kind of like toothpaste almost. It has very fine granules inside of it, and when you rub it over the case, it will essentially sand away, buff out very small scratches. You don't want to use it on something that's got a lot of texture or anything. You can knock it down. Same with the like very glossy items. You don't want to use it on that. So as an example, like you wouldn't really want to use it on this GameCube top. You might end up kind of dulling that out a bit. But something like this with a matte finish, it works great on. It won't get out big scratches, but it does a good job. Then what I do is hit it with a little bit of this, and really all that is it's a car wax. It's for plastics, and it gives it just its shine back. So, I mean, that looks pretty darn good. It will be prone to fingerprints with this wax, so that's one of the troubles, but it's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, I mean, that looks pretty good to me. The door opens well. The cartridge slot, the connectors are clean. I didn't even have to really get in there to clean them at all. I've added a back cover to this, so if you open it, that's where the battery goes. Made sure those screws are back in place. I mean, everything looks good. The labels are in good shape. This is a good looking system. So this one, as if you remember, it was the original one that had the bad door. So my guess is when they were looking at these, they hit the open button, door didn't open, they wrote it off as defective. So I mean, that's good for me. All this took was a bit of a clean and it's in great shape. So that's it for this system. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I'm going to try and tackle this one next. So that's the one, makes noise when accessing discs. So we had it powered on, but it just wouldn't actually load the game, and it made a lot of noise. So my guess is probably one of the spindles is bent or something like that. So we'll take a look at that next video, and hopefully we'll be able to get 2 of these working. Thanks a lot for watching again. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video and subscribe down low, and when I load more videos, you'll be first to see. Thanks a lot.